costly weep as I succumb myself to the valleys approaching its next peak, where I will meet another teacher with another lesson and even deeper wisdom. But if I ever run into that same cliff again, then I'll be able to call upon my teacher's wisdom that my decisions will affect the people around me. And those are my cliffs. I wrote that at 19 years old, getting off the dope, escaping the gang, staying in shelters up in the University District. And I was hanging out down at the Youth Orion Center where I met Rice Yoba, a poetry hip-hop teacher who introduced me to slam poetry with Saul Williams. And that was the very first spoken word piece that I'd ever written. And what's behind those cliffs for me was that, like, every time I would pick back up the dope and then I would fall, I would drop all of the pieces and lose all of my family around all at the same time. And so for me, those cliffs are like all the people that build in to make me up who I am. I want to be there for them. I want to love them. And that was the beginning of a sobriety stint that here in about a week and a half is going to make 23 years. And today that piece has a whole lot of meaning to me because it always reminds me that we don't do this alone. We do this together. You know, there's nothing that I've ever done by myself. Getting sober was with a whole bunch of folks. You know, getting through education was with a whole bunch of folks. All of the movement stuff, all of the people that put this event together are friends and comrades and allies and constituents and people that we've been side by side with for a long time. And that what we do together, and we are stronger together. And so I open up with that piece because that's how I felt like I needed to be grounded. My name is Renaissance. I'm with 350 Seattle. I'm with Who Streets Our Streets. I'm with Seattle Solidarity Budget, right? And in all ways, we're fighting for a planet that means something for us. And I keep coming back to this question: what does it mean to win justice for our people if we don't have a planet to live on? And what does it mean to have a planet to live on if we don't have justice for our people? And so we fight at the intersection of the resources that the system seems to deny us. And they keep pushing more police and more prisons and more punishment and more control. And then they blame us for the things that are going on in the world. But we have to solve that. And so today we're saying, houses not, houses not, houses not, houses not, houses not. Because houses are what we need. Food is what we need. Services are what we need. We need each other. We don't need more punishment. We don't need them to take us away. We don't need them to blame us. That doesn't work. These get really complicated. I am an uninvited guest here. And when I say that, you know, we are on unceded lands of the Duwamish people, the Suquamish people, the Snohomish people, the Tulalip people, the Muckleshoot people, the Puyallup people, many of the Coast Salish peoples. And my ancestors were stripped from their land and brought here. And then through generations, now here I am today. I don't actually have a place that I could repatriate to. And the reason I said that these things are often complicated is because acknowledgement, in my opinion, is not enough. You know, I don't exactly know what is enough, but I do hear the call, land back. There's more to do than just saying, yo, I recognize that my boot is on your neck. Is that good if I just say that my boot is on your neck? Or do I need to do something about taking the boot off your neck? In fact, do I need to do something like what restorative justice teaches me and do something to heal the harm of the boot being on your neck? And I hear all these claims about, well, I'm not responsible for that. Those were my ancestors, but if today I benefit from something that happened in the past, then I have a responsibility to undo that. And so I think about this and how we do that. And so I think that it's good to start with that this country was founded on genocide and oppression and enslavement and murder, and it is still doing those things to this very day. And that's what brings us here now. See, where am I at in my rally, in the reading? I have a whole list of folks that I would like to bring up to talk about what brings us here today, which is the Grants Pass decision. And I don't want to dive into too much of that. I'll be talking in between and while folks are speaking. Would y'all like to hear some people talk about it, some experience and some things that are going on now and pointing us in the direction of the future? All right, so without further ado, help me welcome Katie Gendry, a community organizer and service provider, up to the stage, to the microphone.
Thank you, Ren. Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here at this rally to say that people should not be punished for living outside, right? My name is Katie Gendry, and I speak from the perspective of an outreach worker who believes in person-centered care, harm reduction, and meeting people where they are at. I also speak as an abolitionist and someone who's passionate about neighbors helping neighbors through mutual aid. I believe in a world based on care for all people in the planet. I've met repeatedly over time with hundreds and hundreds of unsheltered people on the streets or in encampments, listening to their specific needs, short-term and long-term goals, hardships, obstacles, ideas, passions, and dreams. We are all closer to being unhoused than we are to being wealthy. Anyone can become unsheltered at any point in their life. Each person is unique in their past, their hardships, and their specific needs and dreams. People seek assistance in many different forms. People seek privacy, security, and autonomy. People seek living indoors to improve their health and to find connection and be seen and feel a sense of belonging. People deeply value their connections with their people, their pets, and the community they have built around them. Everyone is deserving. As Seattle Solidarity Budget puts it beautifully, we believe true safety comes from guaranteeing that people's material needs are met. Every person in Seattle should have what they need to survive and thrive. Instead of choosing to fund what people actually need and what is proven to work, the city chooses to allocate millions of dollars for sweeps and police and locking people up. Boo is right. Sweeping and criminalizing people for living outside prioritizes the comfort of business owners and housed people over the very real needs of unsheltered people. Sweeps forcibly disband communities and do immense harm to the most vulnerable unsheltered people, isolating them from what little support they might have had access to. There are huge gaps in resources and specialty services, including housing. Cops are overfunded. Services and housing are underfunded, or in some cases, non-existent. The city prioritizes carceral solutions that don't work over person-centered solutions that do work. I have seen firsthand how incarceration of vulnerable people in crisis who want help results in their death in the short term, and in the long term, results in preventing them from getting jobs and housing. Jail is not a treatment center, medical facility, or service provider. Services like treatment work best as voluntary options, not involuntary ones. Gating services behind 911 calls takes away people's autonomy and compromises safety for everyone. Incarceration makes healing and meeting life-saving needs even harder. Did you know that when people are incarcerated for more than 90 days, they lose their housing status as unsheltered? This prevents people from getting housing and from accessing life-saving benefits and long-term care. Policing and jails do not provide housing, jobs, healthcare, treatment, or trauma-informed care. People who are living outside need to be met where they are at with care and not put behind bars. Jail is not housing. Shelter is not housing. Service providers are increasingly being pressured to become soft cops and work with the city and police to criminalize the people they are working with that trust them. Service providers should distance themselves from policing and asserting control over their clients, and instead, they should thrive to support their clients, preserve their autonomy, and remain person-centered. Thank you.
Katie reminded me that, I was talking about us doing this together, but I didn't say who us was. Would y'all give a round of applause for Soup is Love? A will and a way. South King County and East Side Mutual Aid. Stop the Sweeps. And all of our volunteers and independent coalition members. I'll share more later. And next, I would like to introduce Gina Owens, who has been a member of the Washington Community Action Network for 23 years and a Walk-In board member for 6 years. Gina has advocated for eviction reform, healthcare reform, and more. Gina is also a 5-year member of Healthcare is a Human Right, HCHR Steering Committee, a real change vendor, and was recently appointed to King County Metro Affairs Cabinet. She has used her own lived experience as a former houseless and disabled person to advocate for better accessible resources for people. Please help me welcome Gina up to the stage.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. You all look so good in this sun. I don't know if you can see my shirt or not. I just had to throw that out there. Anyway, my name is Gina Owens, and I have lived in Seattle all my life. I was born here. I worked as a medical assistant for several years at some of the most prominent clinics here in Seattle. But then I was in a car accident in the year 2000. That car accident disabled my spinal cord. So I have to walk with a walker, and I'm no longer able to work. Well, that took away my income, right? So then I lost my housing because I didn't have an income to pay my rent. I was in the housing system for a number of years, 3 or 4, I think. And what strikes me as really odd is that the same story I just told you about me 20 years ago, Gloria Johnson, who is the lady named in this Johnson versus Grants Pass case, has almost identical the same story as me. She was a nurse. She was working. She lost her job. She lost her apartment because she lost her job, and she was forced into the homeless cycle. Now the case is pending, and that's why I'm here today, because I want Supreme Court to listen to our stories, every one of us, before they make their decision. I want them to know that people are not criminals. They are mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, friends, neighbors. They are the community members we live amongst every day. They are not criminals, and they should not be held as a criminal just simply by sleeping on the street. We need to stop that. We need to stop it not just here in Seattle. We need to stop it not just in D.C. We need to stop it from Seattle all the way across the country in every state. Thank you. It's not enough that our country, the most richest country in the world, has this many homeless people in every state. That is a crying shame. That means our federal government is doing something wrong. What are they doing wrong? Not listening to us. I had a speech but I was compelled to just come up here and speak to you from my heart, because that is what it takes. We hear statistics all the time, and you'll probably hear more statistics today. You've already heard some. I'm not going to give you statistics. If I'm going to give you any statistic, I'm going to give you one statistic. If there is one homeless person sleeping on the streets, that's one too many for me. That is the only statistic I need to know. My mission is to make sure that a face is put on every single person who sleeps on the street, every single person who sleeps in a shelter. And believe me, the shelters are not really all that great. They like to make you think they are. They like to make you think they're giving you services in these shelters. But I have been in some of these shelters. I don't want to tell you how bad they are. And it's a crying shame. And that is most of the reason why people won't go into the shelters. Because one, they are treated badly, they are dehumanized, and two, the services are not great. Supreme Court needs to know Gloria Johnson was not a criminal when she became homeless. She was a nurse. Gloria Johnson is not a criminal now because she sleeps on the streets. She's a human being, just like me. 20 years ago, that would have been me if I wasn't so hard-headed the way I am now. Okay, I don't apologize for that. Okay, sorry. But 20 years ago, that could have been me. I just open my mouth and ask questions. Some people are afraid to do that, or don't know how to do that, or don't know who to ask those questions to, so they go with not getting the services they need. I'm not about to do that. You're going to tell me what I need to know, because I need to get to the next phase of where I want to be. And that is why I advocate. I've been advocating now for 23 years for housing and homelessness, for health care, because health care does go hand in hand. If you don't have a home, you get sick. If you get sick and you have medical debt, you lose your home. So it all interconnects, right? A lot of issues interconnect. Look around your communities. Find an issue that's important to you. Make sure it links to other issues, and work towards helping those issues better. That's what I do now. That's what I've been doing for 23 years, and that's what I'm going to continue to do. And I'm going to watch this case, because I want to make sure that Supreme Court is hearing us all the way in Washington, D.C. So you all help me now. Yell as loud as you can. Homeless people are not criminals. 1, 2, 3, go. Homeless people are not criminals. We are human beings, right? Thank you.
How about we do that again? Homeless people are not. Homeless people are not. Homeless people are not. Homeless people are not. And next, we'd like to introduce Morgan Sandis, who is a service provider, an animal lover, and a poet. I'm here to share some experience with y'all. Please help me welcome Morgan up to the microphone. Is Morgan here? Okay. Well, I think this is a great opportunity to introduce all of the folks that have been a part of the coalition to fight this thing, right? Stop the sweeps. Real change. Washington can. Transit Riders Union. Be Seattle. Share. Wheel. Black Star Farmers. Subvert UD. Nicholsville. Sweepless in Seattle. Oh, I love that name. Washington Health Outreach. And National Vehicle Residency Collective. Anybody find Morgan? Okay, I'll come back. I'll come back. I just want to make sure. Right, I know what it's like to be passed on a mic. Next, I'd like to introduce Nikita Oliver, who is a community organizer, a lawyer, an artist, an educator, and an abolitionist. They are a longtime advocate for intersectional human rights, and they do a lot in our community. Please help welcome Nikita Oliver to the mic.
Is it okay if I start with a poem? Is it okay if I start with a poem? Do you want me to just speak?
You can do a poem.
Sometimes it's so confusing living in between. Brushing up against what's unseen while it's punching me. Though my purpose goes beyond floating like a butterfly and stinging like a bee, I know it's hard to see. Warrior blood on the ground, rows of concrete. Tear up these streets, our greatest purpose being naturally. Who we are, who we be, grow with purpose. We build and we grow for the children we owe. A world we don't know before the seeds that we sow and the tears that we cry water the lost souls of time. Reclaim and reroot, and what we know is truth. The blacker the berry, the sweeter the juice. Pull from inside more than our skin. It's the culture and vibe. We on a quest. We come from a tribe. Our hope won't subside. We are the moon and the tide. We ebb and we flow. For the purpose of life is to love and be loved, to love and be loved, to love and be loved. I want to start with a poem first, y'all. Because I think in this moment, the fact that there's even a court case debating whether or not we criminalize people for being homeless means that we have forgotten our humanity. There is no reason why this should even be a debate. Being homeless, being poor is not a crime. It is a failure of the white supremacist, classist system that we live under. Housing affordability and homelessness are an addressable social ill. It is we, and especially these elected officials, that have failed to respond to the need to honor the human dignity of our loved ones. It has already been said time and time again that housing is what? Housing is a human right. It is something we should all be entitled to, regardless of our ability to work. We live in an exploitative, extractive system that says unless we can take something from you, you don't have the right to comfort, the right to well-being, the right to health, and that is wrong. If housing is a human right, then it is a value. And the way that we have structured our society says that we value corporations and the rights of wealthy people more than we do the rights of everyone else. In a city that talks so much about public safety, we avoid doing the exact thing that would make us safest, helping everyone who wants to come inside to not just affordable housing, but quality housing. You just heard the auntie before me talk about how messed up these shelters are. Congregate shelters are not a place to live for anyone. They're places where disease and violence are replicated over and over, and a system that is bottlenecked, that does not provide enough resource or access for the people who need it most, and yet has built our system on those very same people. In Washington State, we have the most regressive tax system, where poor people pay 17% in taxes, the wealthiest pay 0 to 3%. Shame. We know that our communities are safer and healthier when everyone has a safe, quality place to live. What is most important about this case is that it is probably one of the most important cases to be discussed in the past 40 years. It brings before us our austerity and our commitment to exploitation and asks us, will we codify it in law? And not only will we codify that in law, but will we further deeply entrench our commitment to the criminal punishment system and incarcerating people. No one deserves to be in a cage. So as we abolish homelessness, we must also abolish the criminal punishment system, the courts, and the prisons that are used to disappear social problems that electeds and the wealthy do not want to deal with because they would rather hoard resources. When the lower court first decided this issue, they said it was cruel and unusual punishment to ticket or cage people who are experiencing homelessness. Criminalization does not work. It doesn't work for any public health crisis. It doesn't work for substance use. It doesn't work for homelessness. And it does not work for making safer communities. We also know that Black, Indigenous, and brown people are criminalized at the highest levels, and we experience homelessness disproportionately when compared to our white counterparts. Rather than discussing whether or not we should criminalize homelessness, what we should be talking about is land back and reparations. The real answers to making sure that those most impacted, our Indigenous and Black communities here on Turtle Island, have what we need is addressing the theft of land and the stolen labor upon which this country is built. So as the federal government funds bombs, we must demand they fund housing. And as Seattle gives a 23% raise to cops who utterly fail at producing any level of public safety, we must demand that they give 23% raises in how much housing is produced, that they give 23% raises to our educators and our social workers, that they ensure that regardless of your ability to work, you have the things that you need to thrive and your basic needs are met. No one should be hungry, no one should be thirsty, no one should be forced to live outside. So as we live in one of the richest cities here on Turtle Island, it is our obligation to act. It is our obligation to make these elected officials uncomfortable. It is our obligation to make wealthy people uncomfortable. And it is our obligation to turn this fucked up system the right side up, which requires changing our regressive tax system. So I ask you, if not now, when? And if not you, who? Now is the time to act, and we are the ones to deliver.
Still too hot. Nikita Oliver, everyone. If not you, then who? If not now, then when? Now is the time, and we are the ones to do it. That's fire. Thank you for that. Next, I'd like to introduce Ethan Campbell, who is a PhD candidate studying climate impacts and an advocate with Whose Streets, Our Streets, and the Seattle Neighborhood Greenways Coalition. And as Ethan makes his way up to the stage, I'm going to say something that wasn't on this page, which is that Ethan was very helpful in over-flipping that helmet law that they were using to criminalize a bunch of us out here on the streets. Ethan Campbell, y'all.
If not now, then when? Man. My name is Ethan Campbell. I'm so grateful to be standing on these steps today alongside so many powerful human beings, so many amazing leaders in this community. I wear a number of hats. I'm a member of Real Change's board of directors. I'm an advocate with groups like Seattle Neighborhood Greenways and Whose Streets, Our Streets, working on issues related to policing and transportation. And I'm also a PhD student studying the physical science basis of climate change. particularly the ocean and ice around Antarctica. And it's actually that latter hat that I'm going to put on today. Because I see in my research every day that the ice is melting, that the climate system is destabilizing. And while we all face a rapidly changing climate, the impacts of worsening heat waves, wildfire smoke, and natural disasters are not felt equally. Those living unsheltered have borne the brunt of climate change, and that will only be exacerbated if the city of Grants Pass prevails in the case before the Supreme Court today. Around half of those who die from extreme heat every year in the US are homeless. That's around 750 people a year, a number that's only increasing. In King County, at least 5 people living unhoused died in the 100-degree heat dome that we saw in June of 2021. Look, my research on the science of climate change is academic, but these impacts are not academic, they are real. As Justice Elena Kagan noted in arguments in the Supreme Court today, for a homeless person who has no place to go, sleeping in public is kind of like breathing in public. Unfortunately, for those unsheltered, our region's new norm of smoke-filled summer air means that breathing in public is not safe either. For me, the wildfire smoke 2 summers ago brought back the chronic asthma that I hadn't experienced since childhood. But I can close the windows and turn on a filter. The 7,000 plus people living unsheltered in King County today don't have that privilege. And the higher levels of chronic respiratory conditions suffered by those living on our streets reflects that. I want to take a second to say thank you to those with the Services Not Sweeps Coalition and the Healthy Through Heat and Smoke campaign, who have fought to change this reality by standing up community resilience hubs and working to ban evictions during winter and extreme weather events. How important is that? If cities across the US are granted the ability to sweep at will because of this case, people will remain homeless for longer. They will remain vulnerable for longer. And they will remain exposed to climate change for longer. This is not to mention the fact that natural disasters lead to a surge in eviction rates and homelessness. Think Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. Or the fact that climate-driven migration will likely cause severe disruptions in the availability of housing in relatively temperate climate havens like Seattle, leading to more homelessness if our city continues to prevent housing from being built. Imagine cities using a worst-case ruling in Grants Pass to say after a natural disaster, sorry, you lost your home, but we can't help you, and now you have to leave. Or a city like Seattle telling climate refugees from Arizona that actually you have to go back to the sweltering heat because Seattle's full and we don't have any shelter space here. In the end, as Nikita said, this case is about our nation's humanity. It's about whether cities should be able to treat homelessness as a personal moral failing, something that ought to be criminalized and punished, rather than a symptom of our government's failure to meet people's needs. That's what's at stake. And I have confidence that those standing here today are ready to respond should the Supreme Court decide in this case to amplify the vulnerability of those living unsheltered rather than work towards real solutions. Thank you.
Housing is a housing is a housing is a housing is a housing is a. While Ethan was speaking, I was reminded that those of us who are closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. And then that reminded me of what Nikita said, which was this: if not you, who? If not now, when? Right? Because it's us. And we are the closest to the solution. And they like to sit in their chambers, whichever direction City Hall is. I've only been kicked out of there half a dozen times or more. Oh, Sarah Nelson. that being the closest to the problem, we understand it in a way that they cannot. And until they have walked a mile in our shoes, and they're not going to understand what it is that we need to grow through it. And so I think that is real important, what we've been hearing up here. And next, I'd like to introduce, I know I had him here. Oh, I hope I get this right because I'm reading off the page. I want to say Yasada Schroeder. I hope I got that right. Who is a member of Seattle Housing and Resource Effort, SHARE. Did I get that right? Jacera. Sorry, I am so sorry.
All right. Yes, so Jacera Schroeder, here is a representative of SHARE today. I have been homeless since March 2020. The first year I was homeless, I was living in my car, paying rent on that car, and I was doing DoorDash delivery to survive. And unfortunately, I got really far behind on my payments and lost my home and my job. And at that time, that day, I was desperate, and I called Tent City 3 and asked if there was any chance that I could stay there. And they said yes, and I said, do I need to bring a tent? And they said, no, we'll give you the tent, and we will give you the bedding for you to sleep. And it was amazing. It changed my life. So SHARE is a community of homeless and formerly homeless men and women. We are united in helping currently homeless people survive, people living on the streets survive. And to that end, we have a tent city and 5 indoor shelters. And where our strength is we are self-managed. When I called that day, I spoke to a fellow homeless person on the phone. And when I showed up at that camp was run by the homeless people who live in it. SHARE has been doing this for over 30 years. Homeless people are not helpless. They are your neighbors. We are your neighbors. We just don't have a place to live. Second, besides helping people survive, SHARE is committed to speaking out and taking action to end homelessness. In 2016, Seattle declared that we have a homelessness emergency. We do not have a homelessness emergency, we have a homelessness catastrophe. Those people you see living on the streets are refugees from our crisis in housing. What really frustrates me about this is a man-made catastrophe. This is not a natural catastrophe. The other thing that bothered me about this is that we blame the victims of this catastrophe for the catastrophe, which is crazy. And the heart of that and the heart of this case is somehow the idea that homelessness is a choice. Homelessness is not a choice. Poverty is not a choice. It's, as people keep saying, a sign of the failure of our system. So my next point's kind of relevant being across from the library, but for various reasons, I've actually been reading Charles Dickens. We all know Dickens, Oliver Twist. Please, sir, can I have some more? Or every year around Christmas time, we all see the Christmas Carol with Ebenezer Scrooge. And what does he say when there's poor people? He says, are there no workhouses? Are there no prisons? What shocks me is 200 years later, that could be in the Seattle Times today when they're commenting on people who are homeless today. That's terrible. That's exactly what the Grants Pass case is about. And the other part of it is I've been telling this story, and I looked it up because I wanted to get it right for you guys. A story that I thought I'd read in Oliver Twist. It's actually from Bleak House. And there's a homeless street kid, and the cop comes along, and the cop's like, move along, move along. And the kid's like, where am I supposed to move along to? The exact same scene is happening now, almost 200 years later. But I looked it up for you guys, and it was worse than I remembered. The cop actually drags the kid in front of a magistrate, a judge, and says, his kid won't move along. And then he says, where am I supposed to move along to? And even the judge is like looking at the cop like, yeah, where's he supposed to move along to? And then what does the cop say? Those aren't my instructions. My instructions are he needs to move along. And that's literally what Grants Pass is saying. That's literally what Burien is saying today. That's not my instructions. You just need to move along. So my response to that is we are not going to move along. We are not going to move along. We are going to stand firm, we are going to stand together, and we are going to demand, I was going to say ask, but no, it's demand what we deserve as human beings. First of all, stop sweeping. We are not trash. Stop sweeping. Make this catastrophe right. Do the right thing. Everyone who's homeless deserves a home. So finally, I guess I'll say, housing, not handcuffs. That's just crazy. So thank you very much. We will not move along.
Don't stop. We will not. 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 What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? And if we don't get it, if we don't get it, if we don't get it. Next, I'd like to introduce to the microphone Chanel, who is an RV resident, a member of Stop the Sweeps in Sweepless Seattle, and a fierce advocate for her unhoused neighbors throughout the city. Please help me welcome Chanel to the microphone.
Thank you. Okay, so I am having a real problem with this coming to the Supreme Court because it feels like we don't have a way to stop it if it does go through. And what's scary is that we aren't criminals, we're homeless. And we shouldn't be turned into criminals just because we're homeless. Now, I tried really hard, Stop the Sweeps has tried really hard to get us a place to park where it's okay to park, and it didn't exactly work out the way we wanted because there is nowhere left to park. And people have been losing their RVs left and right and end up homeless. And they aren't criminals because they're homeless. We aren't criminals just because we don't have a place to go. So what we need to do is start building housing and stop sweeping everyone in circles. It's not getting anything done. It's getting frustrating. We have nowhere to be, and it's not right to throw us behind bars because we have nowhere to go. I mean, why can't they just build housing with all this money that they're sweeping us with? I mean, they're just increasing the sweeps. They got nowhere left to park, nowhere to go, and people are just getting desperate, and it's really sad that they're going to turn people into criminals for being homeless. It doesn't make sense to me at all. So it's really it's sad that we're not criminals, and we don't want to have to go to jail just because we have nowhere left to go. You know, it's not right. It's not fair. And it's getting really frustrating being out here and watching all my friends slowly lose their RVs one by one because they keep towing everyone's home, and then they get told, oh we have a tiny home for you, but then guess what Lehigh does? Lehigh just kicks you out before you ever get into housing. So it's like Lehigh is not helping anything. They're I don't know what they're doing to they're basically. What they're doing is they're getting the numbers so that, hey, look, we offered them services, right? But as soon as they get into Lehigh, they get kicked out. That safe lot is not good for anyone. It's just they get their RV taken away from them, or they get kicked out before they ever get into housing. So I mean, I don't understand why we can't just build housing with the money that we were sweeping everyone with constantly. I mean, we deserve a place to be, and we're not criminals just because we don't have a place to go. Like, we just need a place to go where it's okay to be. And if the Supreme Court does actually pass this law, it's going to be really scary. It's going to be a scary world out there. It's not just in Seattle, but everywhere. And yeah, I kind of feel helpless because how are we going to stop the Supreme Court from making that decision? I hope they can hear us and they realize that it's not right to criminalize somebody for being homeless, and that we don't deserve to go behind bars because we have nowhere to go. So basically, I just hope that the Supreme Court makes the right decision and we don't all end up behind bars over it. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chanel. When you were speaking, what came to my mind is that we've been throwing around this word to criminalize, to make criminal. Like, what does that mean? And that was a difficult one for me to grab a hold of. But the way that it was explained to me is that the people in power identify elements of our identity, and then they turn that thing into a crime. Like, you know, every human being on the planet must sleep in order to be alive. Every human being on the planet must urinate to stay alive. And then they like make those things crimes. And so they're, in this like colorblind United States society, they can't go, you as a human being are illegal, right? Because no human is illegal, and that's kind of like in violation of the Civil Rights Act. But if they say that a behavior that we must do is illegal and that we have to do these things, then what they've essentially done is said that we are illegal, and that is wrong. I've seen it done with, young black brothers giving handshakes. That's been made almost illegal to do, where then it all of a sudden justifies a stop and frisk, like because they assume that every person with dark colored skin and male body is selling drugs anytime they shake hands, right? We can't just be showing love. That's criminalization. And it shows up in lots and lots of places. So because that word kept coming up, I figured that I'd share a little bit about that while we're here. And I'm hoping that our next person, Andra, is just Andra? Nah, ain't nobody just, okay, but since that's how you want me to introduce, Andra, everyone. Did I say that right?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Andra, last name Kranzler, but really I just been an advocate for people living homeless my entire life. In 1996, I wrote a journal entry that asked, why do people have to be homeless? And I spent the last, a lot of years trying to answer that question. And I think it's unchecked power and a lot of resources that cause people to live houseless. I'm the chief of staff for Councilmember Tammy Morales, so I stand here in her stead. But I recently came from the Tenant Law Center where I was the directing attorney. 4,000 people contacted the Tenant Law Center every month through the King County Tenant Resource Hotline, 206-580-0762. Any renter in King County and Martin Luther King Jr. County can call that number and get in real-time advice to stay housed. In that role, we said, we have one phone call, and in that phone call, we're gonna help every renter that contacts us and reaches a live person to take one step to stay housed. Because the only solution to homelessness is housing. I'll say it again. The only solution to homelessness is housing. And in 2024, we must evolve past poverty thinking, where those who have the most resources get to decide the person who is denied the most resources is somehow explicitly responsible for that decision. See, once upon a time, I was an advocate for people living homeless, and I walked that street with them. And I showed up in rooms with them with my yellow notepad, and I wrote down every single thing that a quote-unquote advocate had to say, just to make sure that at the end of the day, my client got the resources that they need, that they weren't given an IEP, that they weren't denied an opportunity simply because they didn't say it the way that that advocate wanted them to say it, just because they didn't fit the matrix that the government decided was the matrix that people needed to fit to stay housed. So I'll say this. There's 4 reasons why people become homeless. They have a financial crisis. They have a family trauma. They have a medical crisis. Or they have a severe habitability issue or a house that is just not actually navigatable, meaning they need modifications and accommodations. Over 51% of our people living houseless have disability. We must build ADA, universal accepted housing. We must remind our lawmakers and our judiciary branch that drug addiction is a disease and it is something to be met with a reasonable accommodation, not eviction. And if we don't stand up today and if we don't tell these people that every time you give a landlord a privilege and immunity, you violate our state constitution right to stay housed and to be protected. See, none of us should be able to have privilege and immunities that are not otherwise afforded to the person standing next to us. And I challenge you today, how many here need to go to the bathroom? How many have a safe place to go to the bathroom? We are all humans and we all have bladders and we all need to use the bathroom. So tell me why we're going to criminalize somebody who needs to use the bathroom. FYI, 5:50 is when this library is going to close. And if you need to use the bathroom, you got to go there before 5:50. That's my public service announcement. I'll say housing is public safety. I'll say housing our unhoused neighbors is the public house response we need to make our communities safe. I'll say that you have 4 reasons, right, that become homeless. And all 4 of those reasons that I listed off are all things that you can get in community. When I was at the Tenant Law Center, almost 99% of the people that touched the services got to stay housed. You know why? Because we intervened. So tell your electeds to fully fund civil legal aid. Not at the court. Not when you get to court. When you get that notice. Tell your landlord that they have to accept current rent under RCW 5918-283, that they have to accept a partial pledge, and that they must work with you on a reasonable payment plan. Tell the landlords across Martin Luther King Jr. County in Seattle, Washington, that they all need to make sure that their units that they're renting to us are habitable and that we have a right to dwell in safe space. So we all need to know our rights. And we all need to stand up. So I tell you, call your renter neighbor that's got a lot of privilege and tell them to enforce their renter's rights. Tell your friend who owns a house to call their elected and tell them that you deserve to be housed and that a solution that says you get to be evicted and you cannot sleep on the street without getting a fine is a violation of your constitutional right. You have a privilege and immunities protection. You are not supposed to be treated differently than the person sitting next to you. So I just say to you, I stand here in solidarity. I'm really nervous about this decision. See, I used to go to all the jails across the state, and I used to help people on conditions of confinement. So I didn't come because I was asking about what got you in the jail. I was coming there to make sure you could eat, pray, get light and air, and go to the doctor. King County is probably just coming out of a consent decree or going into one. You're not going to be safer. Our jails don't regulate reentry programming. They don't guarantee that you're going to have a safe place to call housing. And they're not going to ameliorate get rid of all of the collateral consequences that you will come back into community with if you go to jail as a unhoused person. So I would just say that we need to stand together, united, and if grants pass is the decision that we most fear, then I say we need to link arms tighter. And I would say that you need to know that you are seen. You are seen. And when I walk past you, I cry with you because your struggle is my struggle. We need to stand together. Thank you.
Housing is a housing is and when do we want it? When do we want it? Housing is a when do we want them? Housing is a when do we want it? There's me taking some of my activist license and mixing up the speeches and all the chants and stuff together. Is everybody still doing okay? We're going to have a little intermission here. Is that okay? I'm going to bring somebody up, Jay, to talk about all the things that are going on here and what's available to you and everyone here. Stop the sweeps. Stop the sweeps. How's our neighbors?
Hey y'all, like I said, I'm Jay. I'm just here to do a little pointing at resources. So a big shout out to all the mutual aid crews who came out to bring supplies. We got A Will and a Way here, Transit Riders Union, Seattle King County Mutual Aid, Greenwood Mutual Aid, Stop the Sweeps, Subvert UD, Coffee Not Cages. All these people are around and they all need your support. So as you go and pick up some food in the back there's some food up here. We got soup, we got pizza, we got clothes, we got shoes. talk with these people and see if you can get plugged in with their work. See if you're living in their neighborhood that they operate in. Yeah, so go and get some stuff, but see if you can plug in. These mutual aid networks are really important. They're
Should have seen it coming. Hit the ground running in the opposite direction because my life was meaning nothing to those cops with the guns in hand. Pop, 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 pop. Here we go again. Got another badge of honor running across his shoulder, man. But why is it gotta be life is valued less than non-living property? Things that don't walk, things that won't talk, things with no soul, things without heart. Object by every sense of the word. Got more worth than a life. That's absurd. But how else could they own a human being unless they were to reduce them to a thing? Sell it, trade it, made it, complicated, debated, the price at which it was stated. Said if places was traded, then justice be waited. But the coldest thing that I ever did see was to make us think that they ended slavery. But have you ever actually read Amendment 13? Where they made an exception. I hope you're peeping a lesson. The crime clause of justification to move and arrest them, to conceal and punishment, enslavement, investment, profit from leasing convicts to mines and plantations, the spine of this nation, black belt, southern tribulations. Fat cats with fat pockets getting richer than George Wallace on Jim Crow and politics. And while Booker T was like, just take it, we'll make it. Du Bois was like, forget them haters and face hiding KKKs. Get educated and take the ballot box before they encase it. Because Section 2 of the 14th Amendment stated and gave basis for felony disenfranchisement, which was a slap to the faces of the newly liberated because, this whack system, they couldn't change it because they couldn't vote to replace it. Black codes were the new modes of enslavement, vagrants to chain gangs, work on the pavement, repaying the debt to society that was never that shady in the first place. Tulsa, Oklahoma, the first case. A black metropolis that rivaled New York's monopolist with black teachers, lawyers, and doctors. They separated from white culture. Was obvious that integration anomalous, like the Battle of Salamis, not analogous to the Freedom Riders in 1961. Peep game, son of the sun. Anubis, Akhenaton, Timbuktu, Cairo, Addis Ababa, Abyssinian Zulu. Who knew that the negative language in the 15th Amendment could and would be used for legal lynchings and social estrangement? Like, forget the arraignment, there's a tree, let's hang them. Billie Holiday's strange fruit to state-sanctioned ghetto assassinations for those who escaped the new Jim Crow and prison slave labor. Yo, for real though, these crooked cops out here ain't nothing but modern-day slave catchers. The Fugitive Slave Clause of the United States Constitution, Article 4, Section 2, and I quote, no person held to service or labor in one state under the laws thereof, escaping into another, shall in consequence of any law or regulation therein be discharged from such service or labor, but shall be delivered up on claim of the party of whom such service or labor may be due, end quote. Is still in force and on paper, and you cannot begin to debate it that the 3/5 clause has been erased when prisoners who cannot vote are still being counted as voters in the states they are engaged in, regardless of whether or not that was the state from which they originated, all so that Congress can have more seats in office. Now, what I'm saying is that I should have turned away because black lives and brown lives in this nation with these laws, these rules, these ideological traces are not valued on the basis of our being human beings, but rather on the sweat that our labor displaces. And that is why these cops, they get away with emptying shells in our hides on an almost daily basis. Because this place is racist. I figured that was a great way to bring everybody back. I hope y'all enjoyed the mingling with everyone and seeing what's going on at all the canopies and the tables and having some old friends that you're hanging with and meeting some new friends that you get to know that we're going to do some things with and whatnot. It's always beautiful. And we thought that it would be a good idea to sort of like break up the onslaught of words and ideas because community is how we're going to do this thing, right? If not you, who? If not now, right? Because we are the ones that are going to make the difference. And next, I would like to introduce Professor Sarah Rankin, who is the director of the Homeless Rights Advocacy Project at Seattle University. She has been working collaboratively with her students and the Washington State Lived Experience Coalition on Know Your Rights workshops and other legal resources for the unhoused community. Please help me welcome Professor Sarah Rankin. You earned that title.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hey, everybody. One of the most boring things that will happen to you today is for a lawyer to tell you what this case was about in legal terms. And I'm going to try to do that both as a lawyer and as a human being. Unfortunately, I can't do those things at the same time. We cannot count on the law to do the right thing. That makes me sad to say as a lawyer. So let me tell you, at least from my perspective as a lawyer, what this case is about, what this case is not about, and essentially how I feel about it as a lawyer and a human being. This case is about whether cities should have the right to banish our neighbors who are experiencing homelessness from the city. So, as many of you know, the laws in Grants Pass made it illegal, made it against the law for people to sleep in public. And what that means is, as you all know, sleeping is a human need. You cannot survive without sleeping. All of us need to sleep, and I saw someone with a sign, 100% right, sleep deprivation is a form of torture. And the way that that Grants Pass was using this law, they said it applies to everybody. The record shows that the way that Grants Pass was applying this law, which made it illegal to sleep in public, was only against unhoused people. So that means on a beautiful day like today, if you're in the park and you're sleeping in Grants Pass, beautiful day, resting on your blanket in the park, the decision is going to be made on whether you appear to be unhoused or not. The decision is made on whether you appear to be poor or not. And this is not me saying that that's the way they enforce the law. That's what the record shows. Hundreds, several hundreds of people in Grants Pass were hit repeatedly with so many tickets that they owed thousands of dollars for doing nothing other than committing the offense of sleeping because they had no safe and legal place to do it other than to do that outside. So that's what this case is about. And I'll tell you something else. In terms of sweetening the framing of what this case is about, you only need to listen to the exact explanation of the city council president for Grants Pass, who admitted on the record in a public hearing, the purpose of this law is to drive homeless people out of Grants Pass. So this case is about whether it is legal for cities to banish people experiencing homelessness from their boundaries. So that's what this case is about. What this case is not about is also upsetting for homeless rights advocates. This case is not about the legality of sweeps. So don't let anybody tell you that this decision is going to make a difference in terms of whether cities sweep or not. It will not. Even if they decide for the plaintiffs in this case, cities can still sweep. This case is not about the legality of sweeps. This case is not about whether cities can impose reasonable time, manner, and place restrictions. That's not this case. This case is not about whether cities can jail you or fine you if you decline an offer of shelter, even if that offer is not meaningful. So it is depressing when you think about what this case is not about. This case is only about whether cities should have the right to jail you or fine you to death or fine you out of town for no other reason than you don't have a safe and legal place to sleep. That's what this case is about. As I said before, I wanted to talk to you about how I feel as a lawyer and how I feel as a human being. The answer on both fronts is that exactly where I started. We cannot depend on the law to do the right thing. We cannot depend on lawyers to do the right thing, okay? I heard a number of other speakers talking. It sounds like it's depressing, but I'm going to tell you why I'm happy. I'm happy because we don't need the law to do the right thing. We need people and community to do the right thing. So educate people around you about what it means to have cities arguing for the right to make someone's existence illegal. Educate your neighbors about this, because if they really reflect on it, I think most people at their core don't know what this case is about, because if they did, there would be much wider outrage. It should not be the case that cities are hungry for jailing and fining people experiencing homelessness. That achieves, not only, it actually does achieve something. It doesn't achieve anything in terms of helping homelessness. What it does is it achieves exactly what the city council president of Grants Pass is looking for, which is drive people out. If the Supreme Court finds in favor of Grants Pass, it will be dystopian, in my view. That is because it will be like a domino effect. Every city is going to then outlaw sleeping within the city boundaries, and you could have an entire patchwork of states in which it is not legal for you to exist if you don't have a home. So this is a dire situation. I truly believe that our neighbors, even our housed neighbors, don't fully understand what this case is about. So I know that's depressing to hear, but what I want it to be is galvanizing. What I want it to be is for us to stop waiting for courtrooms to figure this out. We have to figure this out. We have to vote the right people into office. We need to create the community that gives everybody the right to exist and starts to effectuate the right for everybody to have a legal and safe place to live. So power to the community. I truly believe we can do this without the law.
Housing not. Housing not. Housing not. Housing not. Thank you, Professor Sarah Rankin. That's an excellent segue of the kind of policy that we push and who we're pushing. Who here has heard of Initiative 137? They tell me that like we just heard, it's social housing. Social. House Our Neighbors is perhaps one of the dopest organizations to pop up here in Seattle in a while, and challenging the city council and the Chamber of Commerce, which is those in the seats of power, for what they were doing, and then winning. And then it was like, what do we do now? And they were like, well, why don't we fight for social housing? That's a good idea. Why don't we make sure that everybody can have a place to live? And I think that's really dope. And then all of a sudden they just grew and emerged and sprung up. And then first we passed the first one, and now that was Initiative 135, and now here's Initiative 137 to fund all of that, to make sure that it gets built and make sure that it gets taken care of, and that these things that we're doing actually come to pass, all the things that we want. And I'm gonna point out Caitlin over here, who has a sign up. And if you haven't signed the petition for Initiative 137 to make sure that it gets on the ballot so that we are actually fighting for. It's interesting, right? When the city council or something starts to try to like push a levy, there's like 9 people that decides. And I think, if I remember correctly from what I was told, that every single initiative that was run by the people in Seattle has won. If that is not encouragement to sign on to that and to get our homies to sign on to that, and our grandmas and our aunties and uncles and everybody else who can, I don't know what is. But when we fight, word. So next up, I'd like to introduce Eagleson Williams, who comes from a long line of wood carvers from Vancouver Island, Diitaront First Nation. Also a talented photographer who loves how people see different things through a camera. You can watch him carve his beautiful creations at Pike Place Market occasionally, on the weekend, or at the Space Needle. And you can also follow him on Instagram at Williams Family Carvers. Please help me welcome Eagleson to the microphone.
First off, everyone having a good day? Definitely, there's a lot to say. Kind of getting like stuck. Shoot, I kind of lost my train of thought. So, it's so last 2 decades of my life, I've slept outside. Can't say I have a home to go to, and that's tough to say. And now it's like, if this like grant gets passed, like our people has already been suffered enough. There should be no more suffering, no like black or white, because we are all human. And a lot of people, even the government, seems to forget, like, we're all human. It's not easy to survive out here. It's not easy to be out here. Like my dad would say, you have to have sealskin to live out here. And people I seen as being cruel and not caring, more selfish and just themselves and not being there for people. Like this past few weeks before this event happened, I was walking around the city and talking to people, because we are the people. There shouldn't be no laws, and people need to take accountability. And then, dang, I forgot where I was really going with this. I don't even know like where to like. It's so much to take in and like think about. It's definitely not easy, but we all make the best of it. Dang, I don't know what to say. It's my bad. Yeah, criminalizing homelessness, like they shouldn't deserve to get handcuffed and thrown in, because like our people, there's a lot of our people in prisons. And if you went from being homeless to jail to prison, it's going to cause a ruckus that nobody wants to see, because it's just like, how's that fair to the people that are in prison for life? Then compare to a person being homeless and then going to jail for. That's just like, you shouldn't like have to like go through that. And like being 2 decades sleeping outside, I've slept by churches, I've slept by the waterfront, and I was like 9 years old. I'm 29, so 20 years of being outside is not easy. Not knowing when you're gonna have your hot meal, your next hot shower. Like what I wanted to say earlier how many of you could say you've been outside without your cell phone or not, like you sleep on a park bench and try to understand where people like myself and others don't have that like luxury of eating, showering, and just like go outside one night, sleep out there and try to understand where all of us has been through. So I appreciate that everyone has a stand to do something, to stop the sweeps, and that we all have to stand up and rise. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good to see you all here. Thank you all for coming. My name is Linda Soriano. I'm enrolled with the great Lummi Nation. I always say great because they are great. We are a spiritual people, and we're activists. We are involved. I want to point out something real quick. The sign over here that says, "Without shelter, people die." To my knowledge, that phrase was coined by Tim Harris of Real Change, formerly of Real Change. Okay, she said, Anitra says it was coined by WHEEL, the Women in Black nonprofit. Well, I've been altering that on my internet access. Without shelter, people will continue to die. What year was it? 2015, when Greg Nichols, at the time he was mayor, he declared a state of emergency on homelessness. Can anybody out here tell me, has something changed? How many people are indoors? Most importantly, how many people have died? The Wednesday silent vigils, every chance I get, I go and I stand silent vigil with the ladies, the real women in black. One thing about those silent vigils, my heart goes out to the women's shelter, those women who constantly write down the names of the people that have died. Most of them homeless, some of them formerly homeless. And the most cause of death is those drugs. The drugs, fentanyl, but there's also homicides, illnesses. People give up. They just give up and they'll hit the drugs. Some will turn to criminals. To my knowledge, my personal feelings, we have street people and we have homeless. The street people, they prey on the homeless. I don't like it when the news media blames criminal activity on the homeless. The homeless are being preyed upon by the street people who hit the streets. They don't know how to go home. They got a home. Many of them they come from wealthy homes, Mercer Island, Medina. Without shelter, people will continue to die. I will be 71 years old in a few days. I have talked in council chambers at City Hall so many times. I can't tell you that I have seen positive change happening. The current mayor, Bruce Harrell, has he given time yet to the real women in black who have repeatedly asked for a meeting from him? No. He needs to come and talk to the ladies and listen. When we have a problem, we want somebody to listen. Well, in this situation, he's the one that needs to listen. Anybody out there agree? We need city and county, state and federal funding, social affordable housing. When our socialist council member, Shama Sawant, was on council, I was very active in what she was active in because I like her method of getting out there, getting into the streets, being involved in CHOPS, everything. The social affordable housing people, we need to do more. We need to do more. Eagle Son, I wanted him to pour his heart out. Tell him of his experience, being assaulted, having his possessions stolen from him. like my family, a dysfunctional family. Linda is blessed. I have never been unhoused in my life. However, I have had the experience by choice. The old immigration building on the edge of Seattle's Chinatown, if anyone knows about that, when it no longer became the immigration headquarters, that building stayed empty. And several of us, Leo Rhodes, if anybody remembers Leo Rhodes, involved with Tent City 3 and Nicholsville, he invited me to come show support, sleep out on the sidewalk. I said yes. I couldn't get anyone else to come join us. I don't know what's the status of that immigration building. What has been happening now in the streets? We get nice crowds like this and people showing up. Please, everybody, don't let this be your one-time showing up. You tell your neighbors, your family, your friends, your coworkers what you did today. Tell them. Open up their eyes and their heart. Help open up their heart to what's going on. Our people are dying. Without shelter, people are going to continue to die. Thank you, guys.
Housing is a housing is a housing is a no person is no person is no person is no person is. Yeah, I'm reminded when Professor Rankin was speaking, you know, a thought that came to my mind is like, how many places in my life have I been told that I do not belong? I didn't belong in school. I didn't belong in the store. Didn't belong on this side of the border. Didn't belong on that side over there. Don't belong in the park. Don't belong in this neighborhood. Sundown towns, when I saw one in like real life, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. To define a human being as illegal is got to be something, but these people don't actually have that authority, and yet they're behaving like they are, but we have the power to do something about it. If I was a preacher, I might say something to close that statement. Can I get an amen? There we go. I couldn't resist. Next, I'd like to introduce to the microphone Dee Powers, who is a formerly unhoused person who has been involved with mutual aid because doing things together. Who keeps us safe? Who keeps us safe? I really believe that mutual aid is the way that we're going to win. And the community organizing for many years. Today, they are here on behalf of Coalition of Orgs, Be Seattle, and the National Vehicle Residency Collective. Please help me welcome Dee Powers.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dee Powers, and I'm standing here to talk to you tonight because I was safely and stably housed just 2 years ago after 7 years of living in my vehicle less than 2 miles from my last permanent residence. In 2015, I was already paying 75% of my monthly income toward rent and utilities, barely hanging on to the rental I'd found in Pioneer Square. Then the property manager slapped me with a 40% rent increase, far out of reach. I had no choice. I moved out of that shoebox of an apartment and into an even smaller shoebox of a motorhome, where I remained until temporary federal funding in 2021 gave me a road back inside. 3 out of 4 of America's lowest income households pay at least half of their incomes on rent. And just one rental increase, one medical emergency, one unexpected expense could send these households into homelessness, just like was once done to me on the whim of a corporate landlord. I was once one of an estimated 653,000 people who experience homelessness each night in the United States. I am grateful to be healing from the trauma of 7 years living like an outcast in the same city I have called home all my life. I know I'm one of the lucky ones. I have a permanent home now where I can sleep undisturbed. Sleep's essential, after all. It's something every human needs and something every human will die without. Criminalizing the most basic acts humanity requires to survive when there are no other alternatives is absolutely inhumane. It is cruel. It should be seen as abhorrent to anyone with half a heart. King County has approximately 5,000 shelter beds, and they are all full. The people we see sleeping in parks and near our freeway exits are there because there isn't an alternative. There is nowhere else to go, and everyone must sleep eventually. I'd like to imagine that all of you have pulled an all-nighter at some point in your lives. Can you imagine trying to do it in the rain without a tarp to provide you shelter? Or maybe in the middle of winter without a blanket? Or just simply endless nights in a row wearing you down until your body simply says, no more? Where will you lay your head when your body says it's time to sleep? Do you have a choice? Because tens of thousands of people each year in King County spend at least one night without that choice. They sleep where they are able. I slept where I was able. Sometimes I didn't sleep because I didn't feel safe, and my mental health deteriorated as a result until I got a good night's rest. We cannot penalize vulnerable people for a situation we can fix. And believe me, this is not a problem too big to fix if we prioritize our funding right. We need deeply, permanently affordable housing. We need transition services like tiny house villages. We need outreach instead of useless police with their tickets and handcuffs. It is proven that it is less expensive to house someone in permanent housing than to send them through a cycle of penalization and incarceration for simply attempting to exist in public space without an alternative. As of 2021, it costs over $154,000 to incarcerate someone for a year. In comparison, a year of shelter, fully staffed with wraparound services, could be under $44,000. It isn't just humane, it's fiscally responsible. I'd like to close out with a poem by Ian Macmillan titled A Shakespearean Sonnet About Doors. It's not much to ask, just a door to lock, a door that won't break when someone kicks it. Door with a keyhole, respond to that knock, or not, my choice. It's broke, so let's fix it. The world, I mean, not the door. That's okay. It's my door to my room. Look, here's the key. The world, though, that's different. Somewhere to stay is what we all need. Somewhere to be me, and not just someone you blithely ignore when you see me sleeping on the street. Let's begin with this. A door. Just a door to start with. A door. Food, then light and heat. The world must respond to this simple truth. Let's all have a door. Let's all have a roof. Thank you.
I've been thinking about a concept out of, from Alcoholics Anonymous, and how much it relates. What they said was it was like the philosophy of a man having a headache, beating himself on the head with a hammer to get rid of the ache. right? And when I'm thinking about that, and all of a sudden I think about city council, and I think about the mayor's office, and I think about all the times that they keep throwing cops at social issues over and over again, and they throw cops and the headache gets worse, and they throw cops and the headache gets worse, and they throw jails and the headache gets worse, and then they lie to us and they say it's a justice center, but really it's a jail for kids, and they throw that at us, and just last fall we were fighting off like a new war on drugs. It's all the same things over and over again. So like the philosophy of a person having a headache, beating himself on the head with a hammer, is what's coming to mind listening to everybody share. Where did it go? There we go. Next, I'd like to introduce a person who probably needs no introduction, Carl Nakajima, who is a poet, an activist, and a multilingual real change vendor. Carl is a staple of the activist scene in Seattle and can almost always be spotted with a handmade sign for causes supporting liberation and human rights. He's probably one of the most gentle and fiercest people out here. Loving and caring is a blessing. Carl's poetry is based on his lived experiences and that of the community. Please help me welcome Carl to the microphone.
Hi, my name is Carl Nakajima. I'm real change vendor. I don't know, you can call this poem this bunch of complaint, nothing positive. Even if there is no shelter, sleeping outside is a crime. How can sleeping be a crime? Can anyone live without sleeping? Are you telling us to sleep standing up like a cow? If we lose our home, are we not allowed to sleep? Do you think they became homeless by choice? Is it a crime to have had misfortune? Unfortunate events beyond our control. Unemployment, serious illness, adoption by a bad family, addiction, or COVID-19, etc. Does bankruptcy mean you are no longer citizen? Even though they are American, they cannot lie down on American soil. Everything we do from birth is taxed. Homeless people always pay sales tax. No matter what they do, someone will pay taxes. Become a citizen at the convenience of the government. If conscription was enforced, would they be exempt? Why is being homeless a crime? Where can we find Jesus if he is alive? Aren't they the one with whom Jesus shared food, clothing, and shelter? Do you criminalize the teaching of Jesus? Are those conservative value or American value? Many politicians and judges say they are Christian. But where is it? Is it only church on Sunday? Would you rather be a goat than a sheep? Is it the role of the state to cause misfortune upon misfortune? Why do you use your power to make people in need suffer? Are these the so-called American values? Does the country have no mercy, compassion, or humanity? Shame.
Both fierce and loving like an ocean. Like water shapes the earth. Dope. Next, I'd like to introduce Melanie Cray, who is a public policy manager for Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda, District 8, and specializes in public safety, homelessness, utilities, immigration, and arts and culture.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Melanie, and I'm here on Councilmember Mosqueda's behalf. She's unfortunately not able to make it this afternoon. She's been meeting with some labor partners at Harborview. So as a local elected, Teresa supports housing first policies and opposes punishing people for being homeless. When we move people from corner to corner, it exacerbates the stress and trauma for those people experiencing homelessness, and it makes it harder for outreach providers to find and house people when housing becomes available. Teresa has joined over 150 other local electeds across the country on an amicus brief by Local Progress in support of housing first policies over ticketing or arresting people for trying to survive outside. Signers represent large cities, small towns, rural and urban areas all across the country. The role of government is to make sure that all of our community members are housed and have all the resources they need, and we need partnership and resources at the local, state, and federal levels to achieve this. This case is fundamentally about the kinds of communities that we want to live in, ones where we make sure all of our residents have a roof over their heads, or ones that make homelessness worse by arresting or ticketing people with nowhere else to go. Housing is a basic human need, but we don't have enough homes that people can afford. Rising homelessness is the direct result of a lack of stable, deeply, permanently affordable housing that meets people's needs. Arrests, fines, jail time, and criminal records make it more difficult for people experiencing homelessness to access the housing, health services, and employment that are necessary to come out of homelessness. Landlords are less likely to rent to people with a criminal record. Employers are less likely to hire a worker with a criminal record. And encampment raids often result in the loss of vital records needed to obtain housing and housing assistance. Increased housing costs, not enough housing, mental health crises, financial insecurity, medical crises, and so on, all contribute to these increased rates of homelessness. And there are proven ways to help and provide people with lifelines. Expanding programs that keep housing affordable, protecting critical affordable housing funding resources like the Jumpstart Progressive Payroll Tax, ensuring people have access to support services and funding shelters and transitional housing options. Some people might think that arrests, jail time, and displacement under the guise of tough love can solve the problem, when in reality, it just takes those people temporarily out of sight. The true solutions require housing and services. Research irrefutably shows that providing stable, affordable, and accessible housing and voluntary supportive services are the most effective approaches for ending homelessness. It's time that we unequivocally follow what the science and data tells us and move away from criminalization because too many lives hang in the balance. Thanks everyone for being here.
Melanie, everyone. And I'm so happy Morgan is here. So I get to do the intro again. Let me find it. I know I had it. Morgan Sanders is a service provider, animal lover, and poet who's here to share a bit of lived experience.
Thank you. My heart is beating so hard right now. Okay, so I lived on the streets of Seattle for about 3 to 5 years, depending on what you consider homeless. 3 of those years I was legitimately on the streets, and then the last 2 were like technically homeless, you know, like being in jail or treatment or transitional housing and all that fun stuff. Anyways, when I was living in Stoto, it was shortly after they declared like a homelessness state of emergency, and they decided the best way to do that was to sweep people so they can't be seen. And it was really, really traumatic for me, especially when I was trying to get myself together and I felt like I was all being kicked back to base one. So I started writing this poem, and I had this idea to hang it off of City Hall, like in protest, and I'd get like a big tarp and a big Sharpie, and I'd start writing it out, but it takes a long time to write out a big banner by hand, and there would always be a sweep, or my vehicle would get towed, and then I would lose the banner and have to start all over again. So I never ended up getting a chance to share this poem. So yay, I get to share it now. Tell us of the places left when shelters fill each day. Where else but in public spaces can our ad hoc homes remain? How can you tell us when to go, but never where to stay? It seems we're see-through when it suits you, but just as quick, we're in your way? Tell us of the places that we ought to go instead while we wait our turn for housing. Should we vanish or play dead? When you're faced with human suffering, do you act or turn your head? And if you do not want to see us, we need services and beds. Tell us of the places safe from getting towed or swept. How can we rebuild our lives with that ever-looming threat? Constant shuffling does nothing to get us off the streets, and yet we're out of view to ease your conscience that our basic needs aren't met. So tell us of the places that we always seem to miss. Tell us of these places if you can find them, or desist. Just tell us where this place is, so we'll at last unclench our fists, or stop working to displace us. We all need somewhere to exist. Thank you.
I was fire, heart pounding and all. But always bring that pounding heart to the mic. Next, we'd like to bring up Regina, who's originally from Sacramento, California, and a homeless person advocating for homeless people. They will be speaking and sharing with us about their experience.
Hello. How are y'all doing tonight? I'd be doing a lot better if I haven't been in the shelter for 9 months. I got my daughter over here who's been in the shelter for over a year, waiting for housing. People have come in, gone out, come in, gone out. How long, what's the cap? How long do we sit in shelter before we get someplace that we can actually call home, someplace where we're not shuffled around through the system some more, you know? I've been homeless since I was 19 years old. I'm 50 years old today. That's a long time to not have a home to call your own. I've been all across this country and back, and I've seen homeless from all different walks of life. I talked to a gentleman in Texas who was a doctor. Broke his leg, couldn't go to work. He was raising his son on his own. He ended up homeless with his son. What do you do? What do you do? You know? Lost his house in a foreclosure, blah, blah, blah. You hear the same stories, you know? People end up homeless. Nobody wants to be homeless. Who asked to be here? I didn't ask to be here. I didn't want to be homeless. I had a job. When I moved to Seattle, I had a job. I got a job at Taco Bell. I was working Taco Bell full time and still couldn't afford rent. Still couldn't afford the basics, you know? It's just crazy how they expect so much from a government that gives us so little, you know? Nobody helps us. And other homeless people want to help other homeless people. How much help can I really give? I mean, I'll give the shirt off my back to the next person if they need it, just because somebody else needed it. If somebody who had money were to think about that, I would give my shirt to somebody who had money if they needed it. just because that's the kind of person, that's how I was raised. I was raised to not be selfish, to be selfless. I'm not hopeless. I'm only homeless. You know, the government looks at us like we're trash or we're criminals because we have nowhere to be. They don't never look at their part of it. It's their fault we're here. You know? There are plenty of jobs out there, sure, for somebody who doesn't have mental instabilities or, issues with public or anxiety issues or, sure, there's plenty of jobs out there. But not everybody wants to work. Not everybody can work. I self-sabotage. I get a job, I have a job for 6 or 8 months, and I end up getting myself fired or I quit because my brain tells me that I'm doing too good. What happens when you're that person? You know? I've been watching TikTok videos lately, and this one lady said something about when you close your mouth, what does your mind do? And she said her husband said his mind doesn't do anything. And she said, you mean it's quiet in there when you close your mouth? And he said, yeah. I don't know what that's like either. I couldn't imagine. When I close my eyes, my brain goes 90 miles an hour all the time. I just don't understand where I can see the problems that need to be solved and how to solve them. The government can't. These are educated people. These are people who have never known what it's like to be hungry or never known what it's like to be cold or never known what it's like to not have a pair of shoes that have a full sole on the bottom. 10 years ago, I left Reno, Nevada on a freight train to get out of that homeless situation. In Reno, Nevada, it's horrible there. They have one shelter, one. And it's the family shelter, it's the single shelter, it's the, that's where everybody goes. But they only have 80 beds, 40 for the men and 40 for the women, and 10 houses for the families that come in. How is that helping anybody? There's thousands of homeless people in Reno, Nevada. In California, in Sacramento, California, it's illegal to own a tarp in the city limits. I'll say that again. Illegal to own a tarp in the city limits. They will fine you $500 or 20 days in jail for having a tarp. It's camping paraphernalia. What does that even mean? That's somebody's home. Those are somebody's things. Those are, people who are homeless don't, where do you want me to put my stuff? Well, how do you want me to take care of it? Now I'm not allowed to have things either. Now I have to be homeless and not have anything. That's crazy. That's crazy. I appreciate all the people that help us out here. My ex-husband and I, we had an RV and Stop the Sweeps was always out there. When they were moving us or running us off, Stop the Sweeps was always there. I don't know what I would have done without them. Our RV didn't run. We were lost it so fast, and everything we owned was in there. My ex-husband has since given up the RV and gotten Lehigh, and then got drawn in the lottery. What a lucky guy, right? After only 4 months in Lehigh housing, he got drawn in the lottery. He's got housing for life through Section 8. What the hell? Then you have people like my daughter. She's been in the shelter since February 3rd of last year. That's a long time to sit in shelter waiting. How long do people are people expected to wait? I'm done waiting. I know that. Grants Pass, Johnson versus Grants Pass, that's just absolutely ridiculous. How can you tell somebody that they can't be somewhere? I'm a human. I have feelings, I have needs, I have wants. I have things that I wanted to do in my life that never got done. But you know what? It doesn't change the fact that I didn't ask to be homeless. I asked for help and barely get that. So, thank you guys for being here.
Ty Reed is a mutual aid organizer with the Transit Riders Union, the interim executive director of Real Change, a long-standing advocate for Housing First Solutions, and is probably one of the most brilliant and articulate, fiercest comrades that I know, Ty Reed.
Bob, is it okay if I take this off? Take that off. Okay. It'll come back in. Okay, perfect. Thank you, thank you. He's gonna do AV mode. First off, thank you everybody for having me here today. I really, really, really love seeing all the love. Actually, give me a second. But I want to emphasize something, and I think anybody who's ever heard me speak is as powerful as Rin says it is. It's usually not super, super hopeful. And I think that's okay. It's okay to embrace the fact that the world is falling apart. It's okay to embrace the fact that there is a war on homeless people. It's okay to embrace the fact that we're being told we can't even stand or sit or lie or feed each other or look at each other or breathe or be in the wrong place. And so I heard a lot today about next steps, but I want us to really think about why are we where we are today? And why is it that there is a court case that is going to make being homeless a crime easily, and there's only about 75 people on this lawn? Any one of us, as we learned if you listen to the oral arguments, can become homeless. It's a status crime, right? To some degree, we can move in and out of the status of homelessness. As you've heard, a lot of people who have experienced homelessness have been in and out, sheltered, temporarily housed, in transitional housing, in subsidized housing. So it can change at any point. And yet, as we're facing what is blatant fascism in the United States of America, when what is blatant war on homeless people, we only have a handful of people in the richest city in the world, one of the richest cities in the world, who actually give a shit. That's what I'm concerned about. Because honestly, grants passed does not matter. People say it's going to empower and embolden cities to commit horrible crimes. They're already doing it. Martin B. Boise was decided 9 years ago, has never mattered. You do have a right to keep your private property. The one thing you have in this country is a right to private property unless you're homeless. And so I think the thing that I've been thinking about more and more as we have this rally is what are we actually going to do? Because this case doesn't matter. They're probably going to side horribly. We know who this Supreme Court is. Even if they don't, there are already cities who have committed themselves in all the legal ways to make sure that it is you're going to be jailed if you're homeless. New York City has decided that they can put you into involuntary mental health holds. Seattle has passed another drug law. We have basically, with obstruction sweeps, made it possible to sweep anyone at any point in time, with or without notice. So I ask you, why are you here today versus all the other times that folks who have been experiencing homeless have been swept and murdered and thrown away and had their rights completely ignored? That's my concern, is that we are staring down the barrel of a gun where capital has completely taken hostage our government and has decided that every single one of us can be made a slave. And all that takes is rent being too high and you being in the wrong place with the wrong ordinance. That means that you are now in jail. And once you're in jail, as we've already heard, it's a cascading effect of what you can and cannot do. And so right now, I feel hopeless. It's okay to feel hopeless because we are in a place where it feels like you can go to a sweep every day. You can try to move people's RVs. You can help your neighbors move. I've moved people dozens of times at the same exact sweep, and people still lose their belongings. People still lose their cars. People still, after a hopeless day of sweeps, turn around and OD. We've seen the reports that say that people are more likely to die from overdoses after a sweep. And they're still doing this. This isn't an accident. They don't have, they're not missing the piece of research and information that says, oh, actually sweeps are bad for people. It'll kill people. What they're hearing is excellent. We don't have to kill people. We don't have to round people up like slave catchers used to do. We can just make sure it's too fucking expensive, tell you where you can or can't go, and let society do the rest. What we also haven't talked about is, sure, the government's doing this. What about the vigilantes? What are we doing about vigilantism in Seattle
that has murdered people, that assaults people, breaks their property, violates their privacy every single day. We have nonprofits that are valorized. We Heart Seattle, valorized by Seattle City Council, King County Council, state officials, because that's what we want to do. That's the government's plan, is to sweep and sweep until everyone's dead. And so I appreciate the showing up for this event. And I really do think we should, take in all of the messaging. But I also think we should ask ourselves, what really is next? Because if this court case doesn't matter, and they're already killing people, and they're already sweeping folks, what are we supposed to be doing to combat that? Now, I actually have some good messaging. There's something good on the other side. Everybody who's here is probably already in a mutual aid group, but raise your hand if you do any kind of distro, mutual aid, community service. Doug, your hand's not up. Elena, your hand's not up. Anybody else whose name I know who you do some sort of service with other people? Well, I know a lot of people out there, and if I know that if I get arrested, if I get targeted, if I get made to be homeless, if my job is threatened, I have you all. I won't apply for government programs. Maybe I'll qualify, maybe I won't. I have the people in this audience. And so when we talk about what the fuck are we supposed to do, because that's the real question, this thing, I just feel like it's not going to go great, is the Supreme Court case thing. So I'm kind of preparing myself for that, but also preparing you for that. What do you do in a country when you're faced with the idea that government doesn't do what you want it to? What's the next step? If we live in a democracy, you're supposed to elect somebody with all the great ideas, which we've tried and that hasn't worked. So what are we supposed to do? I would say step one, join a mutual aid group. And I say that, and I don't mean that casually, and I don't mean that to valorize being in a mutual aid group. It's because you need people to take care of you. I need people to take care of me. I'm not capable of doing it by myself, and my government has shown that they don't give a fuck. And also, I was radicalized by doing direct aid to people in encampments. I saw before everybody else what laws look like in practice, what it looks like to literally have zero rights, what it looks like to be assaulted, to be stolen from, and nobody cares. You can catch it on camera. Stop the Sweeps has documented for years the theft of property, and no one cares because there is no recourse when you are poor, when you're homeless, when you're fighting for people who are classless. And so I say this today to say that the hope isn't in the courthouse. It never was. The hope isn't in some elected official. It never was. The hope isn't in whether this passes or not. The hope is in that you all turn around and decide we're going to be a community. We're not going to let the government decide whether a neighbor is someone who's housed or not. We're going to actually build that together ourselves. And so, I say all this because that's where I found hope. That's where I found community. Not just like 4 years ago, before the start of COVID, I was radicalized by going out and feeding people. I went to my first sweep at Ballard Commons in 2020. And I was horrified, disgusted, and embarrassed that the neighborhood I had just moved to was sweeping people with dozens of cops, not a bottle of water to be seen, and just telling people to move along where. You can be radicalized too. You do not have to accept the neoliberal agenda that has been set before us, where we just find the most radical socialists to put in office. We just give more money to the same nonprofits, hoping that they're not going to make their shelters horrible places to live. Or we can build those things ourselves, because we've seen through decades and decades of divestment that they're not really going to do it. And it's okay to move forward knowing that we don't need the government anymore. It actually makes things a little bit easier. And so I really appreciate everybody taking your time today. But regardless of this court case, you need to be involved in what is going on when it comes to homelessness, specifically in Seattle, because we are doing things even other cities aren't doing, but because you live here too. Care about your neighbors. Care about people who live on your streets, who are outside on your streets, who you work with, who are your neighbors in your building. Learn your neighbors' names, right? Because when it comes down to it, we know we literally only have each other. And so I'm really grateful to be here, to see a slew of faces for people who are willing to cook food, to bring out clothes, to bring out drinks, to educate people. These are the people I trust to take care of me. The folks that I've been building relationship with on the street for years have taken care of me for years. And so I want you all to see, when you feel that hopelessness rising up inside you because we live in a blatantly capitalist system, the way that you get past that is to reach out.
is to actually find people who care, to reach down into yourself and do the thing that we're not supposed to do, which is ask for help, to build relationships, to let go of like this neoliberal white supremacist culture that says we are alone and we need to donate some money somewhere to solve our problems. We are the solution to all of these frickin' problems. So thank you, everybody. I just want to do a shout out to Regina. I've known Regina for like a few years. I'm so proud that she's been able to be here today. It takes so much to be able to get from where you live all the way to where there's going to be a rally, to talk about what has happened to you, to talk about and advocate for yourself. So I want to thank everybody here who has experienced homelessness, who was able to make it out and talk about what that means, because I know that it's often extractive. Nobody here is going to give you anything back for telling that story, but hopefully those stories, those experiences inspire everybody here to step outside what we've been doing and we do something new together. So thank you, everybody. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with being depressing about a depressing situation, right? But for no time that I've ever heard you talk have you not pointed us in a direction that we can actually achieve something. And you have the deepest faith in the human condition. It's inspiring. Thank you. Next, we'll bring up Anitra Freeman, who has been an ongoing activist for the poor and unhoused for more than 30 years, and is one of the first people in Seattle to use the word sweep to describe an encampment removal. Anitra is part of Women's Housing, Equality, and Enhancement League WHEEL, Women in Black, the Washington Poor People's Campaign, and a vendor with real change.
Stop the sweeps!
Stop the sweeps!
Stop the sweeps! Stop the sweeps! Thank you. Yeah, my name is Anitra Freeman. I'm a participant with both SHARE and WHEEL, homeless organizing efforts, and members of the Services Not Sweeps Coalition. One of the things that WHEEL does is to facilitate 2 fully staffed women's 24-hour women's homeless shelters. And believe me, congregate shelters can be a safe, clean place for building community and stabilizing your life. Of course, these are shelters that were created by homeless women themselves. Isn't that amazing? When you actually involve homeless people in solving the problems of homelessness, you get good results. I'll be damned. Well, our shelters have been taking in 30 or more extra women every night and still have to turn women away because we have no more room. And neither does anybody else. WHEEL also stands, women, as Linda told you, Women in Black vigils. Whenever a homeless person dies outside or by violence, 380 last year, 90 already this year. Without shelter, people die. We're standing a special vigil on May Day down in Burien at the Burien City Hall at 5 o'clock, 5 to 6 p.m., because Burien is trying like hell not to create any homeless shelter. And they're trying like hell to sweep homeless people off their streets. At least 7 homeless people died in Burien last year, and at least 3 have already died this year. We're standing a vigil for 10 homeless people in Burien on May Day for Burien. Please join us. Wheel signed on to an amicus brief in the Grants Pass case. The brief pointed out that to forbid somebody to even have a blanket if they have to sleep outside is certainly cruel. It can be a death sentence. And if you don't want to die on the streets of Grants Pass, your only option is to leave town. That's banishment. The city of Seattle spent $387 million on encampment sweeps last year. You could shelter at least 2,000 people for a year with that much money. The Seattle city attorney thinks that it is unreasonable to demand that Seattle create shelter for all of the homeless people before she can sweep them. If she just suspend encampment sweeps for 1 year, you could have enough shelter that you wouldn't need sweeps anymore. In 2021, the city of Seattle spent $154,778 for each person they jailed. You can house me for a lot less than that. You could house me and pay all of my medical bills and even get me false teeth for less than that. You might be able to send me back to college for less than that. Building housing is the real solution to homelessness. Building shelter is at least a mitigation of the problem. Sweeps don't solve anything. So it has been said, sweeps hurt. Sweeps cause harm. They break the contacts that people have with any services or support systems. They drive people into isolation and despair. They rob people of their survival gear, medications, essential documents, or even personal items that you might be the last thing that you had from home. And sweeps don't even help the housed neighbors who are complaining. They don't really help them. They're a con. They take taxpayer money to just move people along to nowhere, and they're going to come back. It's theater. It's a dramatic show with no real content. It always bugs me to read the medical examiner's death lists and see that somebody died on the street of natural causes. Is that the city we want? It's natural to die on the street? So I was asked the other day, what phrase I would use instead. And I said, negligent homicide. Mayor Harrell, stop killing people with false promises and false solutions. Meet with Wheel. Talk to homeless people. Ask homeless people what they really need. And then fucking do it. Thank you.
Fucking do it. Hey, the only thing that comes to mind right now is stop heralding the people. Yeah, stop heralding us towards destruction. Stop heralding the climate. You're right. You're just all the things. Anyhow, I want to thank everybody for being here. There's only one short thing left for us to do, which is I would love to bring probably. I wouldn't really know how to describe this person in a way that would do justice. But we've heard over and over again that we are the solution. Who keeps us safe? Who keeps us safe? The embodiment of that. You didn't tell me how to introduce you. I just know him by Cheech.
Just call me many things, just don't call me late for dinner. All right, just to close up shop here and how to plug in. Now, looking at all of you that are out here, I feel like most people are already plugged in. And that's why we so appreciate you, love you. And Ty Reed has already talked about community and how much that means. But if you're not plugged in just yet to Stop the Sweeps, you can follow Stop the Sweeps on Instagram, on Twitter, and still on Facebook. Many ways to follow Stop the Sweeps. Essentially, Stop the Sweeps, how we resist, is we treat people like human beings. That, to me, is resistance against the state violence, the repression that we are seeing. All the sweeps that we are seeing. You show up and you simply treat people like fucking human beings. Another way to plug in, Services Not Sweeps Coalition. So many of us are here, we're already part of that coalition, but we've been working very hard on a winter sweep ban, expanding that to extreme weather sweep ban. I mean, we're seeing the changes, right? Extreme weather, all the smoke, the freaking cold, the rain. And this is one way through the legislation that we want to push the sweep ban. So please plug in. Also Instagram, also Facebook for Services Not Sweeps Coalition. So, as Ty has already said, we cannot depend on the government. And also Sarah Rankin talked about we cannot depend on the courts. So don't wait until we hear however this is going to turn out. We need to start now on building our mutual aid networks because that is who we can depend on, each other. So there's a lot of mutual aid folks out here, a lot of different groups that brought out all the food, all the snacks, all the clothes, the harm reduction. This is what we need to build. This is what we need in order to fight the increased state repression. So I want to just thank everyone here for coming out, hanging with us, and also thank you so much to Renaissance for emceeing such a glorious time.
Hey, y'all. Thank you so much for coming out. Really appreciate it. I know we ran long. I just wanted to say really quick, there's a lot of people who got here really early to help set up. There's a lot of people still here. If you want to lend a hand, many hands make light work. We got a lot of stuff to tear down. I appreciate you all. I know we all want to get out of here and get some food. So thank you all for coming.